My parents dumped me at a rural airstrip at 16 with a $100 bill and a note that said time to learn self-reliance. 20 years later, they begged me for housing, so I gave them a rental application. Background check required. My name's Tasha. I'm 16 years old, and I used to live, in Colorado Springs. It happened 2 summers ago. I had just flown back from spending a week with my older brother, Nate, who's stationed in North Carolina with the Army. It was the first time I'd flown alone, but it didn't bother me. Both of my parents are pilots. Small aircraft, hobby-level stuff, but they treat it like religion. So when they offered to come pick me up in Dad's twin-engine, I said sure. The airstrip they chose wasn't the main airport. It was one of those tiny rural ones an hour outside the city. Just a concrete strip and a storage hangar. When we landed, I expected a quick refuel and a ride home. Instead, they waved from the plane and took off again. At first, I thought it was a joke. I walked toward the hangar, trying not to panic, trying to believe that maybe they were doing some kind of quick loop. But then I saw it, a note, taped to a wooden crate like a cheap movie prop. It read, "Time to learn self-reliance. Find your own way back. Love, Mom and Dad." I stood there, reading it over and over. The words didn't make sense. Not in the way that mattered. I checked my bag, no wallet, no ID, just a prepaid flip phone and a folded-up $100 bill. I looked around for cameras, like maybe this was some sick reality show, but it wasn't. No one else was around, just the wind, a field of nothing, and the faint smell of gas and gravel. I sat on the crate. My hands were shaking. My parents left me, on purpose. My first instinct was to call Nate. But I knew he'd go nuclear. He'd drive across 3 states and knock on their door with a baseball bat. And I wasn't ready to make things worse, not yet. Not until I understood why. I flipped through the contacts list on the burner phone. There were only 2 numbers saved. Home and Ray. Ray, my uncle, my dad's older brother. The family screw up. He was a trucker, last I heard. They never talked about him unless they were mocking him. Ray and his stupid diesel dreams, Dad once said. You don't want to end up like that. I hadn't seen Uncle Ray since I was 9. He used to sneak me peanut brittle when my mom wasn't looking. He taught me how to siphon gas once, and Dad nearly lost his mind. I stared at the phone, thumb hovering. Then I pressed call. He picked up on the second ring. Tasha? I don't know how he knew it was me. Hey, kiddo, you okay? I wasn't, but I said, not really. I need help. Tell me where you are. I read the sign on the side of the hangar. I'll be there in 10 hours, he said. Don't talk to anyone. Don't move. He didn't ask why. He didn't ask what I did. He just came. I'd wrapped myself in a dusty old tarp I found in the hangar and drifted in and out of sleep, jerking awake every time I heard a branch snap or a bird call that sounded too close. The second I heard the low rumble of a semi growling down the gravel road, I knew it was him. He stepped out of the cab in worn jeans and a faded Kansas City Chiefs hoodie. Same crooked smile I remembered from when I was little. You look taller, he said, and pissed. Mostly cold, I mumbled. He didn't hug me. I didn't expect him to. But he handed me a hot breakfast sandwich and a blanket and opened the truck door like he'd been waiting to do it for years. We didn't talk much during the first few hours of the drive. I sat in the passenger seat, chewing slowly, staring out at fields and highway signs, letting the silence settle between us. Ray didn't pry. He just drove and kept the radio low. It wasn't until we crossed into Utah that he spoke again. They always treated you like that? I glanced at him. What do you mean? Like a science project. Like parenting was just a performance. I swallowed. This was new, even for them. Ray snorted. Nah. That kind of stunt takes planning. They've been heading toward this for years. I didn't have the energy to argue. He wasn't wrong. He brought me to his place in Reno. A small house with faded blue siding and a crooked mailbox, but it felt more like home than anywhere I'd been in years. The guest room smelled like old books and pine cleaner, and the sheets were crisp. I stood in the doorway for a long time, afraid if I blinked, it'd vanish. I cleared out the closet, he said. We'll get you some stuff tomorrow. Clothes, shoes, whatever you need. I nodded. My throat felt tight. He didn't hover. Over the next couple of weeks, Ray helped me enroll in a nearby public school. We told them I was under his guardianship. No one asked too many questions. He showed up in work boots and talked straight. People left us alone. He bought me a bike, taught me how to check the oil in his truck, made spaghetti on Sundays. And when the cops called, because of course they did, once my parents filed a missing persons report, Ray handled it. Calm, firm, no drama. She's safe, he told them. She's with family, and she's not going back. Meanwhile, my parents told everyone I ran away, that I was going through a rebellious phase, that they were heartbroken. I blocked their number, started therapy through a school counselor. Quietly, no one knew. At night, I sat by the window with a notebook and sketched out buildings I made up in my head. Strong lines, thick foundations, places that didn't fall apart when you leaned on them. I decided I'd become an architect. I was done being someone's experiment. I was going to build things that lasted. I was 36 now, head of an architectural firm in Denver that specialized in public housing and urban redevelopment. We were in the final stretch of a massive city project, a cluster of sustainable apartment buildings designed for single-parent families. I'd been in back-to-back meetings all day, running on caffeine and not enough sleep. It wasn't until I finally sat at my desk and picked up my phone that I saw it. 42 missed calls. 3 were from my cousin, Amira. I stared at the screen, confused. We hadn't spoken in years, not since I quietly dropped out of the family orbit. Then I saw the voicemail. One message, 37 seconds. I hesitated, then hit play. Hey, Tasha, it's Amira. This is gonna sound weird, but your parents, they found out where you work. They want to talk to you. They said it's urgent. They're not doing so good. I didn't want to be the middleman, but, yeah, I'm just passing it on. Call me if you want. Or don't. I get it. Her voice was tight, cautious, like she already knew I wouldn't like what she was saying. I didn't respond. Not right away. 2 days later, I texted her. Lunch? Just you. My treat. We met at a lakeside diner in Boulder, somewhere neutral. It was gray and cold outside, but the lake was still, the kind of quiet that made things feel heavier. Amira was already there when I arrived, sipping a Coke, her coat zipped up to her chin. She smiled when she saw me but didn't move to hug me. You look good, she said. Like, really good, strong. I sat across from her. Let's just get to it. She nodded, her hands gripping her cup. Okay. Your parents invested in this aviation tech startup a couple years back. Some ex-Air Force guy promised them insane returns, and they went all in, took out a second mortgage, borrowed against their retirement. It flopped. Hard. I said nothing. They're about to lose the house, she added. They need 200 grand to avoid foreclosure. They think, maybe you could help. I stared out at the lake, and they just now thought to remember I exist? Amira sighed. They're desperate. I told them not to reach out like this. I told them it was a bad idea. Yeah, well, I muttered, they don't exactly have a strong history of good ideas. She looked down at her drink. They say they're sorry. They say it was a mistake, leaving you there. It wasn't a mistake, I said flatly. It was a plan. We didn't speak for a long minute. The waitress came by, dropped off a plate of fries neither of us touched. Just so you know, Amira said quietly, I didn't believe them when they said you ran away. I was 12, but I knew something was off. You were always the quiet one, not the reckless one. I nodded, thanks. I paid the bill and walked her to her car. She gave me a soft smile as she climbed in. They're still your parents, she said gently. I shrugged. No, they're just 2 people who taught me how not to love. Then I turned and walked away. Not at a diner, not at a family gathering. My office, on the top floor of a building with floor-to-ceiling windows, glass walls, and a security desk downstairs that didn't let anyone past without clearance. My assistant, Jamie, buzzed in around 10:03. They're here. I nodded. Send them in, but stay close. They walked in like they were entering a courtroom they thought they could charm their way out of. My mother wore pearls and a stiff maroon blazer. My father had on a gray suit and shiny black shoes, the kind you wear when you want people to think you're still someone. They looked smaller than I remembered, older, thinner. My mom's hair was brittle at the ends, and my dad's posture wasn't what it used to be, but their expressions? Still smug, still rehearsed. Tasha, my mom said, her voice cracking with faux emotion. Oh, baby. I didn't stand up. I didn't say anything. She stepped forward, opening her arms like I might actually fall into them. I raised one hand. Sit. She flinched. My father pulled out the chair beside her and sat first. We were hoping for a more private meeting, he said, glancing around the glass walls. Somewhere more personal. This is personal, I said. They both paused, unsure of what to say. Then Mom smiled. We've missed you so much. It's been too long. It's been exactly 20 years, I said, since the airstrip. Her smile faded. My father cleared his throat. Look, we made mistakes, but you have to admit, it made you strong. Look at you now, head of a company, a leader. I'm successful because I got away from you, I replied, voice even. Dad leaned back in his chair. You were too soft back then. We just wanted you to be prepared for the world. You abandoned me, I said. You left a 16-year-old girl at a rural airstrip with $100 and a note. That's not tough love. That's abuse. My mother's eyes filled with tears. We didn't mean for it to go that far. It was just supposed to be a push. A push? I leaned forward. You didn't even check if I made it back. You filed a missing persons report and told everyone I ran away. We panicked, she whispered. No, I said coldly. You lied, because that was easier than admitting what you did. The silence hung heavy between us. Then I slid the file across the table. My father opened it. Inside was a legal notice, a foreclosure document, a debt package purchase agreement, a property title transfer. He flipped page after page, slower now. Wait, he breathed. This is your house, I said. The bank sold the mortgage to a third-party buyer. That buyer was my holding company. My mom's face drained of color. I own it, I said, legally, as of 6 months ago. They both stared at me in horror. Not anger yet, just disbelief. You came here thinking I was your last hope, I continued. But what you didn't know is that I already hold the deed. I didn't come here to save you. I came to see if you'd finally tell the truth. My father clenched his jaw. You wouldn't. I already did. For the first time in my life, I watched them realize they weren't in control. They hadn't come to ask for help. They had come to plead with the person who now owned the roof over their heads. You came to the owner of your fate, I said. Welcome to my world. They didn't speak again after that. I watched them sit there in silence, dressed up like they were going to a wedding, not a funeral, for the last remaining scraps of their illusion of power. And I didn't feel 1 ounce of pity. After sitting there in silence for a minute, my dad finally pushed back his chair and stood up. His hands were shaking slightly, but his voice came out sharp. This is betrayal, he snapped. You think this is justice? It's cruelty. It's revenge. I stayed seated. You want to talk about cruelty? My mom stood, too, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue she pulled from her purse like it was all part of some act. We're your parents. We raised you. We made sacrifices. You left me in a field, I said flatly. Don't forget that part. You're still angry over a life lesson? My dad scoffed. That's pathetic. No, I said, reaching into my desk drawer. This is pathetic. I hit play on the recorder I had queued up. It was old, grainy, but the voices were unmistakable. Their voices. From the tape Uncle Ray had pulled from my old prepaid phone's voicemail archive. A message accidentally left running after they thought they hung up. She'll thank us someday, my father's voice said, laughing. She'll find her way back, my mother chimed in. It'll toughen her up. Besides, she always hated being babied. They laughed together. That cruel, smug laugh I hadn't heard in 20 years, but had never once forgotten. The room went still. My mother looked stunned, mouth parted like she couldn't believe I had dared to keep receipts. You recorded us? She gasped. I didn't, I said. You left me a voicemail. I just never deleted it. Their faces changed then. My father's rage melted into something uglier, panic. And my mother? Her tears dried up instantly, replaced by pure, cold indignation. You're tearing this family apart, she said bitterly. I stood up, finally, and walked around the desk. I set a thick white envelope on the table between us. This is your 30-day notice to vacate, I said calmly. You have until the end of the month. My dad's face turned red. You can't do this. I can, I said. I have. You no longer own that house. And I don't care where you go next. Motel, shelter, someone else's couch. It's not my problem. Please, my mom whispered. We're still your family. No, I said, quieter now. You were my family, past tense. As security walked in and gestured toward the door, my mother's lip trembled. We were trying to make you stronger, she whispered. We didn't know what else to do with you. I looked her in the eyes. You didn't try to raise a daughter. You tried to break one. My dad looked back one more time as they were led toward the exit, eyes blazing. You're not the hero here. I nodded. I don't need to be. I'm the one who survived. And as the door clicked shut behind them, I finally exhaled. Not out of relief, out of clarity. It started the next day. My phone buzzed with messages from old family contacts I hadn't spoken to in years. Great Aunt Joni, a cousin I barely remembered, even an old neighbor who somehow still had my number. What's going on with your parents? Heard you kicked them out of their home? Are you okay? They're saying some wild things. I didn't respond to any of them at first, just watched the mess unfold. My parents were calling everyone they knew, painting themselves as the victims of an ungrateful daughter who had become rich and cold and forgot where she came from. They told people I was mentally unstable, that Uncle Ray had poisoned me against them, that I was dangerous. It was textbook damage control, and it might have worked if I hadn't come prepared. That Friday night, I sat at my desk and put together a folder, a digital one. I titled it, What Really Happened. Inside, I placed everything. A scan of the note they left me at the airstrip. The audio message of them laughing about abandoning me. Letters they had written to extended family, filled with lies about me running away. Therapy records confirming the trauma. Photos of the hangar. Scans of court documents showing the foreclosure and property purchase. I took a deep breath, typed a short message at the top of the folder, and emailed it to every living relative I had contact info for. No long speech. No dramatics. just the facts. An hour later, my inbox started blowing up. Uncle Dale, I had no idea. I'm ashamed I ever believed their version. Aunt Lisa, Tasha, I'm so sorry. I should have reached out years ago. My cousin Brooke, that voicemail broke me. They really said that? Oh my God. Then one from Amira. I had no idea. I'm so sorry. I believed their story for years. I feel sick. For the first time in decades, the narrative shifted. People weren't whispering about the weird cousin who disappeared. They were whispering about my parents. About the story they spun. About what really happened to that 16-year-old girl at the airstrip. The silence from my parents was deafening. No calls. No rebuttals. Not even a petty Facebook post. I think, finally, they realized the truth had slipped out from under their grip, and they couldn't wrangle it back. That night, I sat on my balcony with a glass of wine and watched the city lights flicker. Not with triumph, not with anger, with peace. For the first time, the truth was out. Not the version they created. Not the one I had to quietly survive. The real one. And it was mine to tell. The property was quiet now, stripped bare. The foreclosure had gone through, the land reassigned, the past wiped clean. But where others might have seen just a vacant lot and a bitter ending, I saw the start of something new. Ray's Landing. That's what the sign would say. We broke ground on the project 3 weeks after I got the final city approval. Transitional housing for youth aging out of foster care, 6 small buildings, sustainable design, community space, gardens, workshops. A place to land when the world's taught you not to expect one. I named it after my uncle because he was the only adult who ever showed up for me without conditions. He passed away last year, quietly, on the road, like always. He never wanted a funeral, said he'd had enough goodbyes in his life. So this was mine. Ray's Landing was more than a development. It was a blueprint. A literal, physical answer to the question that haunted me for years. What do you build when everything you knew was broken? You build what you never had. The press release came out the following Monday. Local news outlets picked it up. My firm's name was all over it, along with photos of the land, the mock-ups, the mission statement. It wasn't a big splash, just enough to get the attention of people who paid attention to things like justice and healing. That's how my parents found out. 2 days later, they came to my office again. This time, they didn't bother dressing up. They looked worn down, unwashed, slumped postures, the kind of desperation you can't hide behind pearls and pressed collars. The front desk tried to stop them, but I gave Jamie the okay to let them through. They stood in front of my desk, side by side, like the past hadn't happened. We heard about the development, my dad said. On the news. We need a place to stay, my mom added. It's temporary, just until we get back on our feet. I didn't flinch. I opened a drawer and pulled out a packet. An application. For tenants, I said, placing it on the desk. Background check required. Same process as everyone else. They stared at it like it was a trap. You're not serious, my mom said, her voice brittle. I'm not making exceptions, I said. You want a unit, apply. I don't play favorites. We're your parents. No, I said, leaning back. You're just 2 more people trying to cut the line. My dad's jaw clenched. My mother's hands trembled. But they didn't argue. They left with the packet in hand, and I knew they wouldn't be back. They couldn't stand a world where I had the power and they had to ask for mercy. Ray's Landing would open in 6 months. By then, their names would be nowhere near the tenant list. And I was okay with that. I wasn't building a home for them. I was building one in spite of them. I got there early, brought lawn chairs and coffee, set them up near the edge of the lot where the old driveway used to be. I wasn't alone. A handful of staff from the nonprofit came with me, counselors, admin leads, construction liaisons. A few of the former foster youth we'd been mentoring joined too. They stood with quiet anticipation, bundled in hoodies, hands in their pockets. The house was already gone, technically. The bank had cleared it months ago, but a few scraps of the old foundation remained, cracked concrete, pieces of plumbing, the outline of what used to be a living room. Enough for memories to cling to, if you let them. I didn't. I set up a tripod, angled my phone just right, and hit go live. Morning, everyone, I said into the camera. We're here today at the future site of Ray's Landing. For some of you, it's just another project. But for others, this is personal. I didn't say why it was personal. I didn't need to. Behind me, the crew started moving. The machines whirred to life, bulldozers, excavators, hauling trucks. One of the younger residents, Jamal, sat beside me and watched with wide eyes. You used to live here? He asked. I nodded. A long time ago. Why tear it down? I looked at him. Because sometimes the only way to build something better is to clear out what broke you. He nodded slowly. Makes sense. The first wall slab caved in with a hollow crunch. Dust puffed up like smoke. Someone behind me clapped. Off in the distance, across the street, I saw them. My parents. They didn't approach. Just stood on the sidewalk, shoulder to shoulder, watching from far enough away to pretend they weren't really there. My mom held a tote bag close to her chest. My dad wore a windbreaker zipped all the way up to his neck. They didn't wave. Neither did I. They stood there like ghosts at their own funeral. A few more people gathered over the next half hour. Neighbors from the old days, curious onlookers, someone from the city council. A woman I hadn't seen in years walked up slowly and tapped my shoulder. "Janelle," she said softly. "Used to live down the block. I babysat you once when your parents had that airport fundraiser." I blinked. "I remember." She looked at the construction site, then back at me. "We all knew, you know, what they did, that they left you out there. But nobody said anything. We told ourselves you were fine." I nodded, unsure of what to say. "I'm glad you made it out," she whispered. "I'm really, really glad." She pulled me into a hug before I could respond. And just like that, a decade of silence cracked open. The last section of concrete hit the ground with a final echo. I turned back to the lot. Where their house once stood, now only dust remained. I didn't smile for revenge. I smiled for survival. For every night I spent in that guest room at Ray's. For every therapy session where I cried into my sleeves. For every moment I thought I'd never feel safe again. Now, I was building safety, for others. And nothing they ever said or did could erase that. As the dust settled, I stood, brushing off my coat. Time to start building.